Hello there, Isa here, back with another video. This time I wanted to showcase well, I guess you could say a new PC that I actually recently built. Now, it's not exactly like my own self actually building this PC, but it's more towards like I get some assistance from the store and they help me to build it up, stuff like that. That's the reason why the build looks pretty clean because there are experienced PC builders there to help with the cable management and stuff. So it's actually pretty cool. Other than that, well, I just wanted to go with a low profile builds because I don't really think aesthetic really matters when I'm just going with like the airflow kind of a thing. So as long as the case have good airflow, it should be fine. RGB is just an extra that is like an extra investment that I don't really want. So that's the reason why I asked them to turn off the RGB, of course, except for maybe the LED on the GPU, I guess. But that's just another thing, I guess. I should just let it on because it's fine. It's very, very subtle. It's not really that distracting at all. Okay, so basically I started this build with basically getting the GPU first because the GPU is very, very important. Well, the GPU is the Intel Arc A770 with a 16GB of VRAM. Pretty good actually for what it is, and especially when I actually got this one under $300, I think it's actually a bargain if you obtain this card under $300. So it's a good thing. Other than the shipping fees and the extra charges that I had to overpay, but that's all right, I guess, because they had to send the whole GPU to my place, anyways. And then I also have a B660MX-E motherboard from BioStar. I guess you probably haven't heard this brand before, but it's basically a brand from Taiwan, I guess, for the longest time. And then I got some weird, not really fancy looking 32GB of RAM, and that is because my motherboard is only like 2 slots. I have to just use this dual channel and that's it. There's no extra lanes for me to place the RAM in different slots or something to optimize the power flow or something like that. But nah, it's alright. Other than that, I also have my i5 12400. Well, I did not go for the K version because I actually wanted the iGPU in the CPU. Apparently, there is this technology called the Intel Deep Link. If you are able to pair a Intel CPU with an iGPU and you actually pair it up with the Intel GPU, it's actually going to help you to do encoding tasks and video editing extremely fast, I guess. Maybe sometimes even like close to double the speed of like rendering videos, I guess. That's the reason why I wanted it, because making videos is literally just what I do for the most part now, except maybe in the future if I have like extra editors or something like that. But I had to edit my videos all the time all by myself, and my old laptop just is not really able to cut it in 2024. And yeah, so that's also the part of the reason why I wanted to build a new PC, because I want a PC that can not just do gaming decently. It has to be able to render video very well. It has to be able to recording the footage excellently well. It has to be able to stream very well as well. Especially with Intel GPUs, I think they are one of the best video encoders stuff in their GPU, especially for like the new AV1 encoding. That new format really changes how you store your video files, as it actually like gives you better clarity footage, but in a smaller file size, I guess. That's the reason why a lot of like huge corporations are literally switching to AV1, because it's an open source video format encoder, I guess, and it's also like lightweight, so it does not really like cost way much more than like for example the H265 codec, I guess. So, everybody is jumping on this bandwagon, I guess. All I just know is that the Intel Arc GPU is excellent at, doing DaVinci Resolve, and also for doing AV1 recording on the free version of DaVinci, which is what I actually wanted as well. It apparently is excellent for like doing other stuff as well, but those are mostly just bonuses, I guess. But at least in terms of like the gaming, I guess you could say Intel Arc GPU is one of the second brand that actually can allow ray tracing in your games, albeit not really as good as like how Nvidia does ray tracing, I guess. But it's there if you wanted it. That's part of the reason why I wanted to obtain this card as well, because for me, I think game performance, as long as it's able to reach near 60, or maybe, sometimes able to hit even higher than that, especially in 1440p, I am already fine with it, because for my gaming needs, I'm just going to upscale my games for the most part, maybe add a little bit of a frame generation from the lossless scaling application that you can get from Steam for like, I don't know, $7, if I'm not wrong. It's literally the meme of like downloading more performance for your PC, but it's actually real, and it increases your FPS by like double or triple or quadruple, which is insane. And that is literally the application I use to play latest games on my old laptop. But now, because I'm switching over to the Intel Arc GPU, it's going to be even better, because now I don't really have the VRAM bottleneck from the GTX 1060 6GB of VRAM, which is like, it's just not enough to upscale certain games like Helldivers 2 anymore, because I guess it's because the lack of VRAM. But with this new PC, I'm able to actually run the upscaling very, very well. I already even did a benchmark for Final Fantasy 16 demo, and I managed to complete the whole demo in just literally in one sitting, just because I wanted to do some benchmarking and stuff like that. And that's probably the footage that you're gonna see now. It's actually able to handle Final Fantasy 16 very well on just the automatic settings that is come with it. Of course, you can probably tweak here and there, and if you want better visuals and stuff like that, you can technically run this game in Ultra, but at this point, to be honest, I don't have a 1440p monitor to test out my performance and the maximum, to utilize my GPU to the maximum. I don't really have that kind of a monitor yet, so fortunately I don't really can tell you about performance in like 1440p. But for 1080p gaming, the latest titles is just going to run like butter, because even if the games have like, for example, like frame drops or stuttering because the game is trying to load something and it just cannot really like catch up at the last minute or something, and the whole game just freezes in that spot, it's really just a minor issue for me. And to be honest, if you wanted to, for example, bypass the 30 frames per second lock on the cutscenes for a lot of games, for example, Final Fantasy 16's cutscene is all locked at 30 frames per second. No matter how good your PC is, the cutscenes always are playing in 30 frames. So if I were to use lossless scaling on them, and I can actually unlock the frame rates to make the 30 frames video to look smoother. Unfortunately, I had to record the lossless scaling frame generation on using my phone as the only capture device, because if you were to record the upscaling alongside with the frame generation, the video becomes very, very choppy, and it just doesn't showcase the smoothness that I'm actually experiencing when I'm playing the game with the upscaling and the frame generation as well. That's the reason why I use my phone to record, and you can probably see the difference there. Like the footage that is natively recorded is actually, well, 30 frames a second, which looks very weird considering the fact that it actually allows you to transition from cutscene into gameplay, And if you are transitioning from 30 frames to 60 frames, it's just gonna look very very odd. That's the reason why I love lossless scaling, because it just allows you to blend the lower FPS parts with the higher FPS parts, so that you just cannot really distinguish between which is gameplay and which is cutscene. And that is making actually a lot of these cinematic games much more immersive than how it's supposed to be, because who cares about consoles being locked at 30 frames per second when you are a PC master race, am I right? Now, of course, I'm not really wanted to brag about like the upscaling and the frame generation capabilities. Yes, sometimes it do have some drawbacks, and that is I cannot really like stream the game using these upscaling methods, because it's probably not gonna record the game easily, or it's not going to be very very good at all in terms of performance when I do all this stuff alongside with streaming. But in terms of like just playing a game just alone like that, and I think it's just very very good that you have this application. And not to mention, the lossless scaling application allows you to also upscale your YouTube videos, or just literally any film at all that is running on whatever frame rates that you wanted to increase the smoothness of. For example, if you want to watch a movie that was locked in 24 frames per second, or a movie that was locked in 30 frames per second, you can actually use this frame generation to just literally make the video more smoother, make the whole movie feel a little bit smoother. And it just works like magic, and it's just one of those applications where it just works like a charm. I'm really really glad that the developer actually keep on developing updates for this lossless scaling app as well. And I'll actually suggest a lot of people who using Intel Arc cards to also utilize the technology, because I don't really think like the consistency of most games, especially legacy titles. I don't really think they're going to implement FSR 3, or even implementing the DLSS 4 or 3 into their games, especially if they are running on like the older consoles. So in order for you to increase your frame rates, and increase the quality of what you are looking on in your monitor, you might as well just use an external application that upscales your game and increases the FPS double or triple or quadruple your FPS by just using this application. So I guess that's just it. So far, I don't really have any issues after flashing my BIOS to the latest edition and reinstalling the drivers using DDU. I just cannot really see any more issues. I haven't really encountered any more issues other than the old BIOS, which sometimes causes blue screens and stuff like that. But after updating the whole BIOS, every issue just disappears. I can play Helldivers, I can play whatever live service game that I love, and it just works very well. Even Final Fantasy 16 just looks so beautiful when I'm playing with this GPU here. So in terms of like bottleneck, I don't really feel anything like that from the sorts of bottlenecking from my CPU and GPU combination so far. I think it's because this two hardware is basically from the 2022 era, especially like the 12th gen CPU and the Intel Arc GPU literally just come out at the same year. So I don't really think there is any issue at all if you run them both together. The only time you're probably going to face issues is if you're running like the older motherboards. Like for example, if your motherboard does not support PCIe Gen 4, you're probably going to have a little bit of a performance hit, I guess. But for the most part, if your motherboard just supports rebar, and you can somehow activate some XMP settings, and maybe even utilize modding from the community about like that whole DXVK technology that utilizes Vulkan to run older games, I think Intel Arc GPU in 2024 is actually pretty decent, as long as you are able to find a Intel Arc A770 card on a very lower price than the MSRP that they are selling, then I think it's actually pretty decent, considering the fact that you have this huge 16 GB of VRAM on a GDDR6. And if you look at the RAM issues that a lot of like the GPU manufacturers are having now, especially if you look like the recent news of the 4070 is going to release a version of it that is actually not exactly the same. It has reduced like performance, but they just use like the GDDR6 VRAM instead of like the GDDR6X or something, and that actually tells me that GDDR6 is just going to stay, and the performance difference between GDDR6 versus the 6X or versus even GDDR7 is just not really, worth it to like just wait for the newer versions of RAM, because from what I've heard, GDDR7 is pretty efficient, but it's costing more than your typical VRAM. So it's just going to be an issue because of the whole AI demanding a lot of RAM, by the way. So that's why we have a VRAM shortage here. I guess that's also part of the reason why Nvidia didn't really like put a lot of VRAM into the GPUs as well. So because I'm not really going to like go for the high end, and I'm just starting out with this first computer, this first PC that I have now, I don't really intend to go further beyond 1440p. I mean, technically the Intel Arc A770 can technically game on 4K, maybe on lower settings, I guess. With some upscaling technology utilized, I guess you can technically do that. But 4K gaming is just a luxury for me. I think 1440p is just going to be a much better solution for me to upgrade to, instead of like upgrading my current setup at the moment. And maybe a little bit more GPU, maybe a little bit more RGB flare here and there, and maybe more extra fans would be the future upgrade for me in the future. And so, after testing a lot of benchmarking and playing like popular games and stuff like that, and I don't really think I need to benchmark a lot more games in comparison to like a lot of other benchmarking softwares does, or I believe this card has been benchmarked a lot of times, especially by YouTubers that are much more renowned than me. So you can probably watch them benchmarking the games out there, especially from the Intel Arc Testing YouTube channel. I believe they actually test all the latest games on like the Intel Arc, and testing like the every single new GPU drivers. I guess if you wanted to know the performance, you can probably check with them. And for me, I think it's, as a content creator, this is just the perfect setup for me. It is less than $1,000, and it's hit the exact budget that I can afford to. And I'm actually really glad that I'm actually own a piece of Intel history. The Alchemist GPU line is probably very, very rough at the start, but I'm really glad that the Intel are just, hard at work on providing new drivers to make it as stable as possible. The only gripe I have with Intel Arc GPU here is that there's no hotkeys for me to record my gameplay, and it's just so annoying because I don't really know why. Now, I understand that the Intel Arc control is literally like an overlay with you had to like press like alternate and I in order to open up the overlay, but man, I think it's still very, very cumbersome if you need to go to the overlay to press start record and then get out of the whole overlay system and then get back into your game and then start the video recording. It's not really as efficient as pressing the record hotkey and then just be done with it, right? Yeah, so that's the only gripe I have with their software. I think Intel needs to improve the Intel Arc control a little bit further. add more features like the hotkeys that I mentioned, and it will probably be killer. And so far, I haven't even tried overclocking the GPU as well. So the performance of this GPU is still going to be even better in the future, especially with more drivers coming up. And since Final Fantasy 16 is like the latest high-end game that I think a lot of people is probably going to assume that takes a lot of like your graphic capabilities, I believe this GPU is able to run it very well even without like proper drivers for it. It just runs excellently on just normal global settings, which is pretty impressive to be honest. I was expecting the Intel Arc GPU to have issues to run PS5 games, but I guess it's not. So, I guess there's no reason for me to even consider the console anymore, since this PC can just run them so easily. And I just hope, Intel improve on their driver updates and optimizations in the future. Hopefully, Battlemage line of the GPUs is way better, and hopefully they are able to, steal the market away from Nvidia and maybe AMD, because I think there are some gripes I have with AMD and Nvidia is that they don't really have a universal aspect to them in terms of like a GPU. That means is like AMD is very good in terms of like just basic gaming rasterization, but once you wanted to use it for like 3D applications or video encoding and editing, it just drops even lower than the Intel Arc GPU. So yeah, that's that, I guess. And then if you wanted to, use applications that are actually much more compatible with like CUDA cores and the AIs and stuff like that, and if you're a person who like DLSS, I guess Nvidia is probably still a better selection if you have the budget for it. Unfortunately, at this price point of under $300, buying an Nvidia card that is somewhere around that price is just a terrible price for per performance proposition, because the only thing you're going to get in that price bracket is just a much more efficient GPU, and that's it. You're going to get destroyed by previous generations. So that's the reason why I wanted to get the Arc A770. Now, is it a better option than the A750 on the A580? Maybe not. But I love myself a huge amount of VRAM, so as a gesture of support, I decided to choose this GPU instead. So if you have any gripes or if you wanted to ask any more questions about my PC build here, you can probably leave some questions underneath in the comment section. I'm going to, explore more stuff with this PC, especially making more videos with this new PC as well. So stay tuned, I guess. If you like the video, please like and subscribe, and I'm going to see you next time. Sayonara.